Welcome, I'm Martina, your trusty guide through the pages of Camp Half-Blood and beyond. Grab your camp shirts, ready your weapons, and let's embark on this epic adventure together. This is Delphi Dispatches. Hey demigods, sorry for the irregularities in uploads these past few weeks and months. If you follow the Instagram page, you might have heard the news that my laptop broke and I couldn't do anything for the podcast without it. So now that it is repaired, I am back and I will continue bringing you Percy Jackson episodes. On some other good news, I survived the entrance interviews into university, and actually I also got into 2 universities. Yeah, so I also had the debacle of deciding where to go. So your girl is gonna start studying in October in Vienna. So I'm gonna be a city girl again. Also, as someone who believes in signs from the universe, I decided to proceed a little bit differently with the podcast. I will try to keep up the bi-weekly uploads, but with the end of my year abroad coming on and me having to move back to Austria in the end of August and then throughout September moving across the country to Vienna, the uploads may be still somewhat irregular, but I'll keep you updated on social media of the times new episodes will drop. Delphi Dispatches. We have some really amazing news coming your way. First up, musical news. The Lightning Thief, the Percy Jackson musical, is coming to London in November. From November 23rd, 2024 to February 22nd, 2025. Casting and the full creative team will be announced soon, so I expect updates on that and I'll pass those on to you as soon as possible. As you might know, I love this musical. I love musicals in general, but this is one of my favorite musicals of all time. So I'm seriously considering going to London just for this. And if I'm already there, maybe seeing some other shows as well. I know they're freaking expensive, so it's nothing set in stone yet, but my hopes are high. We also had a news scare recently, it's like positive and negative in multiple ways. There were some news outlets that reported that The Kane Chronicles was in development at Disney+. This series is being described as being set in the same world as the Percy Jackson series. The fandom, and me included, had high hopes of the Percy Jackson cinematic universe, or the Riordanverse as we call it. But on Threads, Mythomagic, the production company of Rick and Becky, posted the following. I'm just gonna read what they posted. Development can mean a lot of things. The whole point of our production company, Mythomagic, is to develop Rick's books or other writing projects. Rick has discussed Kane with Disney for years since the books were published, especially as these books were US #1 overall bestsellers when they were first published. No contracts currently are signed, so until that happens, there is no partnership with Disney Plus on a film project to develop Kane's, hopefully someday. So yeah, we'll probably have to wait on that a bit more. But I have a theory. Those news don't start from nowhere. And maybe Disney has seen how excited we were and maybe they now will make a Kane Chronicles adaptation? Why not? Also, some news we received was that Glyn Turman, who played Chiron, will receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2025. We also had a birthday this past month. It was on June 16th. It was Charlie's 20th birthday. Now, if you're somewhat online with this fandom, you might already know this next bit of news. But you're still gonna be as excited, because it's somewhat of casting news. While we don't have any confirmed actors for upcoming roles, there were casting calls opened for 3 characters: Talia, Tyson, and a new character called Allison. Even though we only get to see these casting calls now, doesn't mean that they haven't already cast people for these roles. The calls were probably closed before. I think Rick even said that in some tweet or something, and are only now available to see for the public. So I think it is very likely that they already have cast people or have narrowed it down to a few people who are doing like chemistry reads and stuff like that now. But yeah, here is what they're searching for. Let's start with our new character. Allison is a rogue demigod and a member of Luke's army. She lives in the human world now, but attended Camp Half-Blood in her younger years. She will be a recurring guest star. Actresses between 18 to 22 of all ethnicities are being looked at for the role. So very excited for Allison. I love that they're bringing in new characters, like original characters. And also, I see, of course, there are people who don't like it. Like, why are they changing it from the books? It doesn't actually have to mean that they changed much from the books. Because since the books were written in Percy's perspective, we mostly don't get to see what's going on Luke's end of the war, let's say. So they're quite likely could have been an Allison in the books, we just wouldn't have known her, because why would they have introduced her to Percy in one of the fights? And I'm also really curious who her godly parent is. Maybe it's a minor god that would fit into the narrative, or it's some god we've not heard that much about, especially since she's living in the mortal world. She couldn't be from a really powerful god. Sorry, Allison, don't want to offend you or your godly parent. Still. The next up for Tyson, they are looking for actors of all ethnicities between the ages of 15 to 18. He will be a series regular. The casting description for Tyson describes him as being tall, big, but with a heart just as big as he is. He is biologically 8 years old, but looks like a fully developed human teenager due to the mist. His powers are invulnerability to fire, enhanced hearing, and ability to mimic voices. As always, we love Tyson. For now, I'm not going to go too much into the character itself, because some people here might have not read the second book yet. So yeah, and the last role is for Talia. They're also searching for actresses between 15 and 18 of all ethnicities. She's the daughter of Zeus, who gave her life to protect her friends 6 years prior to the series, but was saved by her father and turned into a tree. She has a tough and prickly personality and is described as being a punk or rebel. She will be a recurring guest star in season 2, but with the potential of more in future seasons, since there is no official confirmation of further seasons yet. And the last part is awards. For the Nick Choice Awards, we're still waiting for the award ceremony, so I already talked about that last time. But with other awards, we already know the results. For example, for the BET Awards, Leah was nominated in the Youngstar category. She unfortunately did not win. She lost to Blue Ivy Carter, who is Beyonce's daughter. Carter. Yeah, that's Beyonce's daughter. Not up to my famous children knowledge. Then for the SEC Awards, which are awards from Brazil, Percy Jackson and the Olympians was nominated and won 2 categories, which were Series of the Year and Best Action and Adventure Series. We all know, if you're in the fandom, you know the Percy Jackson fandom from Brazil is huge. And then we have the Telltale TV Awards. Unfortunately, the Percy Jackson did not win in the 2 categories they were nominated in. For Favorite Performer in a Sci-Fi Fantasy Series, where Waka Scobell was nominated, he did not place. At least we don't know where, because they only show the top 2. I think, and 1 and 2 were Michael Sheen and David Tennant from Good Omens. And having just finished season 2 of Good Omens, I'm okay with that. And then in the category Favorite New Sci-Fi/Fantasy Series, Percy Jackson was the runner-up after Dead Boy Detectives, which I'm also not too mad about, because for Percy Jackson we already got a confirmation of the next season. Not so much for Dead Boy Detectives, I think, and I really need more seasons of that show. Then we also found out that for the 2024 AAFCA TV honors, Glyn Turman will be awarded with the Legacy Award. this is not specific to Percy Jackson, it's just, his legacy. And we already know who won, but they will be held, the award ceremony is on the 24th of August. Then we have a new award Percy Jackson was nominated in, which is the TCA Awards, the Television Critics Association Awards. They will be held on the 12th of July, and Percy Jackson and the Olympians is nominated in Outstanding Achievement in Family Programming. Also, which I really find interesting, apparently Disney is also submitting the first season of Percy Jackson to the Children's and Family Emmys, but we'll have to wait and see until they officially reveal the nominations. Demigod discussions. Now, let's start with one of the best parts of the book, I would say, because there are, literally, those parts I'm gonna cover now have been 3 episodes in the show, so you know it's good. So the first chapter is chapter 13, I Plunge to My Death. The trio is on the train towards the west. Percy tries to keep a low profile since his face is all over the news. On their journey, he sees some creatures in the plains, a family of centaurs, and a huge creature that looked like a giant lion. Percy seeing the magical creatures out of the train window, but none of the adults around him noticing it because they had their noses in laptops and magazines is just a good commentary, I'd say. We also find out that they only had enough money to get tickets to Denver, with a layover type thing in St. Louis. While Grover was sleeping, Annabeth and Percy had a heart-to-heart since Percy was talking in his sleep about the voice in his dreams. She doesn't think that it was Hades because he usually appears differently in dreams and visions, but she also didn't tell Percy who would she suspect it really was. During their conversation, Annabeth let slip that she had encountered the Furies once before. She also admitted that if it was her dad who was kidnapped, she would leave him to rot, since he resented her ever since she was born. As soon as he married another woman and had kids with her, he totally forgot about Athena and didn't seem to care for Annabeth anymore. Percy tried to make her feel better by telling her about this awful stepdad and how his mom only married him to protect Percy. Maybe this was the same with Annabeth's dad, but she didn't seem to think so. She told Percy about her running away when she was 7 and her making a couple of unexpected friends on the way. The next day, they made it to St. Louis, where they had a 3-hour layover before departing to Denver. Question though, I only know the term layover from flying, where you have to change your flight somewhere and wait a while. Is that the same here? Is it the same as changing trains and they're being 3 hours in between? Or is literally that train just stopped there for 3 hours and then they will continue? While they waited, Annabeth convinced the boys to go and see the Gateway Arch, since she wanted to one day be an architect and build something like that. Percy found that quite funny, but Annabeth snapped back at him, saying Athena wants her children to create things, not just tear them down like a certain god of earthquakes I could mention. Nice comeback. But yeah, she immediately apologized, realizing it was mean. I found it okay, Annabeth. And Percy wanted them to work together and asked if their parents ever cooperated on some things. Annabeth told him the story of how they made the chariot. Athena invented it and Poseidon created horses. As soon as they arrived at the train station in St. Louis, Grover woke up and wanted food. They made their way to the arch and explored the exhibition at the base. Percy wasn't too interested as Annabeth told him the facts about the construction of the arch, and Grover just passed Percy some jelly beans. After Percy asked Grover if he smelled anything, the satyr just said that the underground always smells like monsters, but Percy still had a bad feeling. He remembered that Hades has a hat that makes him invisible, like Annabeth's cap. She corrected him that Hades' helm of darkness was not like her cap at all. With it, he could become one with the shadows, and he can't even be perceived in any way, shape, or form. Then Percy brought up a good point. How do they know that he isn't there right now watching them? The others had no comforting answers for him, though. Next, we find out that Percy, apparently, is claustrophobic. Since he didn't really like the small elevator car they had to get in to get to the top of the arch. There was also a lady with her chihuahua in the same elevator car as the trio, and on the way up, the woman asked the three where their parents were. And they just lied and said they were down because they were afraid of heights. At the top of the arch, Percy wasn't too happy with the confined space so far off the ground either. But luckily for him, the observation deck was about to close anyway, so they headed back to the elevators. The one they wanted to take was too full for all of them, so Percy volunteered to stay behind and take the next one. With him, there were only the park ranger, a family, and the lady with her chihuahua. As they were waiting, Percy noticed that the lady and her dog were not completely normal. She had a forked tongue and the dog was dripping black foam from its mouth. Percy was confused and suddenly the dog changed its shape in front of him into a chimera. The mortals were visibly afraid, although they probably couldn't see the mythical creature for what it really was. The lady introduced herself as Echidna, the mother of monsters. She also told him that she was sent by Zeus to test him, aka kill him, with her child. After Percy quickly angered her, Echidna sent the chimera after him. He tried his best to fight the monster, but a new demigod against a fire-breathing monster is not really a fair fight. The chimera melted a giant hole in the floor of the arch, and apparently is also resistant against blades because when Percy tried to fight it, his sword just clinked off the back of the animal and fell down. Because after he lost his sword, he also got bitten by the snake tail of the chimera. Echidna taunted him, saying, "If you are really a son of Poseidon, you would not fear water. Jump, Percy Jackson. Show me that the water will not harm you. Jump and retrieve your sword. Prove your bloodline. You have no faith. You do not trust the gods. I cannot blame you, little coward. Better you die now." Percy backed up to the hole in the floor and remembered the few memories he had that had to do with his father. In the last second before a column of flame hit him, Percy prayed for his father to help and jumped. Now that's certainly a way to end a chapter. My favorite quote from this chapter is, "I tried not to drool in my sleep since Annabeth was sitting right next to me." Yeah, nice. My favorite scene was, I think I have a favorite sad scene and a favorite funny scene. The sad scene is Annabeth explaining to Percy that her dad doesn't want her. And my favorite funny scene is when Percy was confused by Echidna's name, asking her if that's not an anteater and her hating on Australia. And the favorite mythological reference is Zephyr the West Wind. There is nothing in mythology particular about carrying him carrying babies down to Earth or something, but he did carry Psyche and her sister to Eros' palace. He's also known as the most gentle of the wind gods and a messenger of spring. Then some of my thoughts. The description of the arch always confused me, and I thought the observation deck was like an open rooftop type deal. So when I saw how it actually looked in the TV show, it suddenly made so much sense to me. The next thing was, is the number on the dog collar of the chimera important? Because it says chimera, rabbit, fire-breathing, poisonous. If found, please call Tartarus extension 954. I've not found any meaning so far of the 954 in the initial Google search. So if anyone has any idea what it could mean or if it's just a random number, let me know. Also, the book chimera is referred to by him pronouns from Echidna, and the series chimera is referred to with she/her pronouns. So I thought, was that on purpose? Yeah, minor details. I also love that Percy had the heroic instinct of having to fight and not letting the mortals die, even though he was scared. A true sign of a great hero. In this chapter, there's one of the few things I don't like about the book. It's the initial description of Echidna and Percy/Rick describing her as fat. As a fat person myself, I find it important to use the word fat in the right context. I personally describe myself as fat because that's how I perceive myself, and I don't have a problem with that term if it's used correctly. But when it is used as a form of insult, I do have a big problem with it. I can see how /why Rick wrote it this way. Firstly, it was 2005, and secondly, he was writing from the perspective of a 12-year-old who doesn't know better. But I think if he would write it again today, he would word this differently or change her completely like they did in the show. Although I want more fat people to be represented in media where it is not their whole personality to change their weight and just be comfortable with how it is. Anyway, that's my tangent. Let's get back to the next chapter. This is a short chapter. It's called Number 14, I Become a Known Fugitive. Percy plummeted down towards the river, but the impact with the water didn't kill him. He just sank to the bottom of the river, scaring the fish away. The river was full of garbage, but Percy noticed other strange things. Not only was he not dead, but he also wasn't wet. He could feel the water around him, but his clothes were dry, and the strangest thing of all occurred to him last. He could breathe underwater. Suddenly he heard a voice similar to his mother's, telling him to say thank you to his father, which he did. A few feet in front of him, he saw his sword. The voice told him to go and get it. The voice came from a figure floating nearby the sword. She introduced herself as a messenger and told Percy that before they go to the underworld, he has to go to the beach in Santa Monica. Percy was confused by this request and wanted to know more, but the sea spirit had to go soon, as the waters here were too polluted for her. Before she faded, she warned Percy not to trust the gifts. And after she was gone, Percy grabbed Riptide and swam towards the riverbank. He surfaced near a floating McDonald's, and a small kid noticed him getting out of the river, completely dry, and wanted to tell her mom, but she was too preoccupied looking at the emergency vehicles piling up near the arch. A news reporter was talking to the camera, and Percy overheard them talking about survivors, which was a huge relief for him. But a few moments later, he heard another reporter talking about a teenager who was spotted shortly before the explosion took place. Hearing this, Percy tried his best to hide and find his friends. He had almost given up hope when he heard Grover shout his name. They were relieved to be reunited again. Annabeth couldn't believe it when Percy told them that he fell out of the arch. As one of the mortals from the observation deck was pushed by them on a stretcher, she noticed Percy and told the paramedics that it was this boy who fought the fire-breathing dog and jumped out of the arch. Before anyone saw him, Percy dragged his friends away from the scene. On the way, he told them what happened and that they needed to get to Santa Monica. When they passed another reporter, Percy froze in his tracks as they talked about him. They said that the kid seen at the scene fits the description of the fugitive Percy Jackson. They made it back to the train station just in time to catch the train to Denver. Like I said, short and sweet chapter. My favorite quote from here is probably the opener. It's, I'd love to tell you I had some deep revelation on my way down, that I came to terms with my own mortality, laughed in the face of death, etc. The truth is, my only thoughts were, ah! Then my favorite scene is Percy finding out that he can't get wet and burning paper underwater. And my favorite mythological reference is probably a Nereid, because there were not a lot of mythological references here, so it's her. And I have also some thoughts. First off, the floating McDonald's. I did a bit of research. So apparently there was one in St. Louis, but it closed in 2000. So was Percy just next to the closed one, or yeah? But there's actually something similar in Hamburg, Germany. Maybe they're in other places as well, but I only know of this one, where it's like, yeah, they're in Hamburg. They have like the channels similar to Venice, not as crowded, not as small, and it's really, people like to like boat through or use the stand-up paddles. And there is like a dock where you can order, I think, from your phone, and they bring you down the McDonald's, because just like up the street is the McDonald's. So maybe it's something like that. Although 2005, I don't know, like ordering from the phone. Let's not think too much about it. I have another observation or thought, but it's a minor spoiler for Chalice of the Gods, so skip the next 10 seconds. Okay, good. So the narrate. What if it's Eudora, the same one as from Chalice of the Gods? Because Eudora means gift of the sea, and was that her? And she also said don't trust the gifts because she knows which gifts are good. Yeah, I hope those were less than 10 seconds so I don't spoil anyone. Next chapter is called A God Buys Us Cheeseburgers. The next day, the train made it to Denver. They wanted to contact Chiron, so the trio made their way to a car wash. Since they couldn't use phones, Annabeth and Grover showed Percy how demigods keep in touch over long distances. With the mist from the car wash and the sunlight, they created a rainbow. Annabeth threw a golden drachma into it and prayed to the goddess of the rainbows, Iris, to carry their message. "O goddess, accept our offering. Half-Blood Hill." In the rainbow, they saw camp. It seemed to be a view from the porch of the big house. The first person they saw was Luke. He told them that there has been some fights breaking out at the camp. Before he could tell them more, a car with overly loud music pulled into the car wash, making it quite hard to communicate. Grover and Annabeth went to take care of that and left Percy alone with Luke. The reason for the fights is that the campers found out about the Zeus versus Poseidon situation and are picking sides. Aphrodite, Ares, and Apollo's campers are backing Poseidon, and Athena is backing Zeus. Percy updated Luke on what has been going on their end, and only noticed that his time was running out when the car wash beeped and let him know there was only 1 minute of water left. Luke mentioned that he was there with the others on the winter solstice on Mount Olympus, and that he saw Hades. He must have stolen it with his Helm of Darkness. But Percy didn't think so, since the gods can't take each other's items. So Luke figured he must have had help from some demigod who could turn invisible and steal the bolt from the throne room. They both realized what Luke was unintentionally insinuating with that, but he immediately shut down the idea of Annabeth being the thief. As the water shut off, Luke's last words were cut off as well. The last thing Percy heard him say was, "Well, take care of yourself out there in Denver, and tell Grover that it will be better this time. Nobody will turn into a pine tree if he just..." As Annabeth and Grover came back from scaring off the other car, they noticed Percy's grim expression, but he didn't tell them what Luke had said, and they went off to find some dinner at a diner. The waitress was quite skeptical of 3 children alone and immediately asked them if they even have money to pay. Before they could answer and get kicked out, a huge, loud motorcycle turned up and the driver came into the diner. Everybody was silent, and the trio was quite perplexed when this man sat down at their booth and said that the food was on him. As the man looked at him, Percy suddenly felt so angry that he wanted to punch somebody. The man acknowledged him as Seaweed's Kid, which 100% confirmed to the trio that this guy was a god, and not any god at that. That was Ares, Clarissa's dad, which is why he looked so familiar. He had the same sneer. Ares told the trio that he heard they were in town and that he had a proposition for them, aka a side quest. Before he could elaborate, the waitress brought up heaps of food, which in writing the script made me hungry, so I took a break. He explained the favor he needed the demigods to do for him. He left his shield in an abandoned water park after he went there on a date with his girlfriend. In exchange, he would get them to LA and give them some intel on Percy's mom. Ares gave them the location of the water park, and the next second, he was gone. Percy just wanted to forget about Ares and get out of there, but the others told him that he can't just ignore a god. As they reached the water park called Waterland, very imaginative name, they had to find the ride Ares mentioned, the Tunnel of Love. Since the park was quite decrepit, Percy wondered why Ares would bring his girlfriend here unless she fits the aesthetic. Annabeth scolded him to not be disrespectful, especially not to this goddess. It is not a secret that Ares' girlfriend is Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, and you wouldn't want her on your bad side. Percy was a bit confused about this since he seemed to remember that Aphrodite was married to Hephaestus. On their way, they came across a souvenir shop and grabbed a couple of new clothes and other goodies. They reached the entrance of the Tunnel of Love, but the pool where there used to be water was empty, and at the bottom of the pool there was a boat, and in it they could see Ares' shield. It seemed too easy. Grover didn't smell anything wrong, and Annabeth only noticed a random Greek letter, Eta, by the entrance to the pool. Percy went ahead and wanted Annabeth to follow him, but she was not too happy about being in the thrill ride of love with this son of Poseidon. She still followed him, and as they reached the boat, they noticed that there was something else in it as well. Next to the shield there was a silk scarf, laced with love magic according to Annabeth, as she quickly shoved it in the backpack and away from Percy. As he reached out for the shield, Percy broke a small string connecting it to the boat. At first he thought it was a cobweb, but as he looked closer he realized it was actually made out of metal, a tripwire. At the same time, Annabeth noticed another Eta on the side of the boat. Realizing that this was a trap, gears started turning. The cupid heads on the edge of the pool shot the arrows across to form a net over the demigods' heads. They tried to escape the way they came, but it was impossible to get through the net. Out from the statues came cameras and a voice announcing that they would be live in Olympus in 1 minute. Annabeth exclaimed that this is the doing of Hephaestus. He made this trap for Ares and Aphrodite, but now they got caught and would be broadcasted to Olympus and look like absolute fools. From somewhere, a small army of spider-esque machines emerged, making Annabeth panic. The two hurried back to the boat, and Percy tried to protect them both from the mechanic insects. Grover tried to pull away the net without any luck. Percy tried to think of a way out and had an epiphany as he thought of water. After Grover couldn't find the correct button or lever for the water, Percy concentrated and tried to use his water powers. Thankfully, it worked just in time. As the countdown hit 0, water rushed out of the pipes and swept them away through the tunnel. They swiftly made it through the tunnel, but as they neared the exit, they could see that it was gated shut and 2 other boats had already been caught against it. They had to jump at the right time, and luckily Annabeth knows physics and could quickly calculate the correct time to jump and not die. As they sailed through the air, Grover swooped in and grabbed them before they could splatter onto the ground and seriously hurt themselves. Percy noticed that the Cupid statues were still filming them. He turned towards them and said, "Show's over, thank you and good night." That did the trick and the cameras shut off. My favorite quote is this one. Maybe it is a problem that requires brains. Ares has strength, that is all he has. Even strength has the bout of wisdom sometimes. Of course, that's something Annabeth said. But also there's a quote I like from Percy. It's when he saw the mirrors in the Tunnel of Love. While Ares and Aphrodite were smooching with each other, they could look at their favorite people, themselves. Then my favorite scene is the description of Ares and his bike. Specifically, Ares now being Adam Copeland in my head, and you cannot change it in any way, shape, or form. And my favorite mythological reference is, I think, the love triangle with Ares and Aphrodite against Hephaestus. Well, actually, I don't think it's a triangle. It would be a triangle if Ares and Hephaestus had a thing going on as well. So it's a angle? Yeah, I think the love angle. And yeah, thoughts. Who would the other cabins back? We heard, Athena is on Zeus' side, Ares, Apollo, and someone else. Ares, Apollo, and Aphrodite are on Poseidon's side, so that leaves us with Demeter, Hermes, Dionysus, and Hephaestus. Who would they back? Or would they stay out of it completely? Let me know what you think about that. Also, Ares' motorcycle, Caucasian skin, gives me just the creepy crawlies. Speaking of Ares, or rather him being Clarissa's dad, if you watch the Instagram page for the podcast, I've posted some of my cosplay reels when I was cosplaying Clarice. She's now my go-to Percy Jackson cosplay, except my OC, so yay, keep an eye out for that. And oh yeah, I still have some other thoughts. Percy proves again that he is very emotionally intelligent. Even though Ares makes him feel angry and makes him see horrible things, he resists the urge to punch the god. And also, regarding the Cupid heads and streaming live to Mount Olympus. Imagine what the gods of Olympus would have said to this little show. Like, they're sitting around in their thrones and like suddenly the TV comes out, breaking news, straight out of Waterland. This son of Poseidon hangs out with this daughter of Athena. Ooh, things like that. And now the last chapter for today is, I think, also the longest, or at least the most iconic out of these ones. It's chapter 16, We Take a Zebra to Vegas. When they returned to the diner, Ares was waiting for them and telling them that they had looked good on TV. The war god pointed them to a big truck which was going straight to LA with a stop in Las Vegas. He gave them a backpack filled with some food and money, and again, the war god made Percy irrationally angry, but thankfully his friends made sure Percy didn't do anything too stupid, except for some smack talking. Back inside the diner, Percy noticed the waitress watching them and making the cook take a picture of the 3 children with this big scary man. Percy thought they would probably be on the news again the next day. Before they set off on the road, Ares held up the last part of his promise and gave Percy the big news. His mom wasn't dead. Yes, she is in the underworld, but not as a ghost, more as a prisoner. This news gave Percy even more hope to continue on their quest and free Sally. After they had snuck on board and the truck had left Denver, the trio explored the cargo, which were 3 poor, neglected animals. A lion, an antelope, and a zebra. All their food was mixed around and the animals looked not very healthy. The 3 of them couldn't do much at this point other than swap back the foods, give them some water, and wait. Grover tried to talk to the animals, but they didn't seem to respond. As they settled down for the night, Annabeth told Percy why she freaked out at the water park. Percy also told them some parts of what Luke had said to him earlier that he and Annabeth go way back and that Grover wouldn't fail again. Percy asked the 2 what Luke meant by that, and they reluctantly told him the story of how Grover brought Annabeth and Luke to camp. It wasn't just the 2 of them though. There was also a 3rd demigod, Thalia, a daughter of Zeus. She was a forbidden child like Percy. As they neared the camp, some monsters intercepted them, and to protect her friends, Thalia stayed behind to fight for them. Grover brought Annabeth and Luke to camp, but Thalia didn't make it. As she was dying, Zeus took pity on her and turned her into a pine tree that stands on top of Half-Blood Hill, to help protect the camp in death as she did in life. Throughout telling the story, Grover came close to tears multiple times, calling himself the worst protector. But Annabeth wouldn't have that and ensured him that no one blamed him for what happened. He wouldn't let 2 lonely half-bloods die. That was a quite heroic thing to do. After Grover calmed down and the 2 had encouraged him more, he fell asleep. Annabeth and Percy stayed awake for a bit longer, and they talked about Annabeth's necklace. She explained to Percy that each bead symbolizes a summer at camp. The first one was a white bead with a pine tree on it, symbolizing Thalia sacrificing herself for her friends. She also told Percy about the ring on her necklace. It was her father's college ring. He sent it to her 2 summers ago. The ring reminded him of Athena since he wouldn't have gotten through without her. He wanted his daughter to come back home and live with them. She tried that, but shortly after monsters came, her stepmom still hated her, and so she was back at camp by winter. They stayed silent for a few miles. Percy was the one who broke the silence, asking Annabeth, "If the gods fight, will things line up the same way they did with the Trojan War? Will it be Athena versus Poseidon?" Annabeth admitted that she would fight next to Percy, because he is her friend. After this conversation, they fell asleep, although Percy didn't have a restful one. In his dream, he found himself in school, forced to take a standardized test in a straitjacket, while the teacher was mocking him. Next to him was a girl he had never seen before, also wearing a straitjacket. But Percy somehow knew who she was. Thalia. She nagged him a bit, saying that at least one of them had to get out of there. In the next moment he was in a cavern with a strange voice again, but it seemed that it wasn't talking to him, but to someone else. The voice was talking about an exchange, and that Percy didn't expect a thing. There was another voice answering, which Percy almost recognized but couldn't quite place. The 2 voices talked for a while, but abruptly stopped as one noticed that Percy was there. listening, even in his sleep. The voice turned to Percy again and sent him to a different location in his dream, a dark throne room, and at the bottom of the throne stood his mother. Sally was still frozen in the last pose as he had seen her, but in the form of a golden statue. Percy startled awake as the truck stopped. The other two urged him to hide. Annabeth put on her cap and vanished, and the boys ducked behind some feed sacks. One of the drivers opened the door and started to torment the animals. He mentioned that they were going to get rid of the zebra now, and it would find a new home at a magic show. Both Grover and Percy got really upset and had to restrain themselves from rushing the driver. As the zebra made eye contact with Percy, he could hear it in his head begging him to free it. Literally. There was a banging on the side of the truck door, and after a bit of back and forth with his colleague, the truck driver went outside to check out what was going on. Annabeth appeared next to the boys, and they quickly opened the cages to let out the animals. Grover gave them a satyr's blessing to safely reach the wilderness. As the two truckers were too preoccupied with running after the animals, the trio made their escape. They made their way through Las Vegas as they stumbled upon a huge building called the Lotus Hotel and Casino. The doorman invited them inside to sit down and relax. Although they were suspicious, they went in anyway and were promptly greeted and equipped with a hotel credit card and a suite. The hotel itself was a kid's dream, with an indoor water slide, climbing wall, indoor bungee jumping, and much more. The trio was confused as to who would have paid for that, but just ran with it, since they were happy to have some place to put their feet up. Their suite was decked out with everything you needed and more, even clothes that fit them. They enjoyed the heck out of the room and then went down to the casino. Percy took use of all the physical games and attractions, while Annabeth played some trivia and Grover played reverse deer hunter. This continued for a while before Percy noticed something was off. The first clue was probably this guy who looked like someone from the last century. After they played and talked for a while, Percy found out that he was indeed from a different time. According to him, it was the year 1977. This shocked Percy, and he noticed that the other people in the casino all seemed to be from across multiple decades. He stormed off to find his friends and get out of this place. Annabeth was still building her city and wouldn't come with Percy, as he had to take on drastic measures and yell the word spiders at her. Not sure that's how phobias work, but okay. Grover was a bit harder to snap out of this trance, so they just dragged him out of the casino. On their way out, the bellhop tried to convince them to stay longer, but they managed to escape. On the outside, they felt like something was off. Percy ran to the nearest newspaper stand and looked at the date. Thankfully, it was still the same year, but it was already June 20th, one day before the end of the deadline. Bum bum bum! So my favorite quote / scene, I have two. First one is Annabeth to Percy when they're in the truck. It's, "I don't know what my mom will do. I just know I'll fight next to you." So cute. The second one is the voice in Percy's dream saying, "Blast his father's blood. He is too changeable, too unpredictable." Oh, you mean like water is? I just found it fun, I don't know. My favorite scene is probably the story of Talia. I mean, it's also my favorite song from the musical, so fits. Then my favorite mythological reference is the lotus eaters. Also what I found out that the term lotus is used for any kind of unknown or strange plant back then, and it's not like the lotus what we would expect now. It could have been, but it's probably not. So some thoughts. First of all, did Talia communicate with Percy through the dream, or was it all just made up by whoever sent him this dream? The next thing is, are horses related to zebras? Probably, right? It's just like a smaller striped horse. Because I know there's something like, I think if I remember correct, that a hippo's closest relative is a horse. So can Percy talk to hippos? Actually, we need to find that out. Someone asked Rick. The next one, I think it's a general USA question probably. So if you're from the States, please let me know, or if you know about this. So what the hell is a hotel credit card? Is it like something specific to casinos or just to Vegas? Or is it like those store credit cards? We don't have them here, I think. At least I've never been asked in a random shop if I wanted to make a store credit card. So can someone please explain the concept of those credit cards to me? Speaking of money, how is the Lotus Casino still in business? Is it a certain god that pays them so much money to keep everything afloat? I mean, yeah, they most likely never have to pay out winning prizes, but the other stuff costs money, like food, equipment. Does it just like magically appear? Also electricity and stuff. Or is it like all somehow covered by the mist? And the last thing is, I would so be Annabeth in this casino because I love trivia. Give me all the trivia. I just never have anyone who plays with me. The best character of these chapters is probably Percy because he really stepped up in these chapters. He did a lot of things. Like in every chapter there's some big Percy moment. I mean, yeah, it's a book about him, but still. Then the best chapter was We Take a Zebra to Vegas, not only because it's the iconic Lotus Casino, but also because Percy and Annabeth have their heart-to-heart and we get backstory on Talia. And the best chapter title is A God Buys Us Cheeseburgers, because it makes me hungry. Okay, it's 12. I'm gonna probably eat soon. Trivia Trials. Last episode's questions were name another project/series Craig Silverstein was a showrunner on, and I have here two I found out. One is Turn, Washington's Spies, and the other one is Nikita. And the second question was, where was Mozart born? And Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born in Salzburg, Austria, where I'm from. Like, the general vicinity, not directly the city, but I won't dox myself. And now, today's questions. Since the Percy Jackson musical is coming to London, what is the theater district in London called? You know, in New York you have Broadway. What is the equivalent in London called? And the second question is, what is the name of the boy from the 1970s in the casino that helps Percy realize that there's something wrong? Extra points if you spell it correctly. Mythical music. This time, I thought of a fun song, and I thought of it while I was writing my notes for the chapter I Plunged to My Death. Today's song for the Mythical Music playlist is Jump by Van Halen. And that concludes another adventure with Delphi Dispatches. Thank you, Demigods, for joining me on today's quest. Please consider subscribing to the podcast. And if you want to connect with me on Instagram, just follow at Delphi_Dispatches_pod for updates on the fun community. This is Martina, signing off until next time. And remember, the real world is where the monsters are.